a long drive from the Isles to the coast. Can't wait to see some water again.
So many people use water. There is only a finite amount of water ever on our earth at one time, and in our catchment at one time. We rely on rain to gain that water, and we simply face, in a growing population using that resource, the need to use it in a more conservative, sustainable way.
Then a year later, people settled further up here in Brisbane and in fact got their water from a creek just near Brisbane Grammar School. Then later on the Enoggera Dam was built, which was a source of water for a fair period of time while the city was developing.
It was first built in 1978. Before that, there was just a pipe that was discharging the wastewater out into the bay. It wasn't treated at all.
There's always a natural background of contamination because we live in the real world. And Mount Crosby is fed by 62 kilometres of river from the Wivenhoe Dam.
The rainfall is captured in the upper reaches of the Brisbane River in Somerset and Wivenhoe Dams. The water is released from Wivenhoe and travels down along the river to Mount Crosby, where we are, and the water is taken from the river by large pumps and comes into the treatment process. The water is treated, has to be treated because there are certain impurities present in the water that has been collected in between when it was rain falling on the hills and when it has arrived here at Mount Crosby and taken out of the river.
Cool. When you live in the outback, you really get to appreciate water. In the city, you just turn on a tap. But I wonder if it's that easy. Come and have a look at how water gets to your tap.
Less than 1% of the Earth's water is fresh and accessible to humans. Even this seemingly small amount of water could be sufficient for the needs of all humans if industrialised nations used considerably less water than they currently do.
Well, that is a real challenge for Council, and one that we can't do in isolation. The challenge of providing good quality water to a city that is expanding is a responsibility of both the suppliers, which is us, Council, but also the community, to understand how important it is to preserve and care for this very precious resource.
Although in Australia water's a resource we take for granted, most of us turn on the tap and water flows out. The World Health Organization estimates that about 5 million people die every year across the globe because they cannot access clean, potable water. A person in an industrialised country uses between 350 and 1,000 litres of water daily, whereas a person living in rural Kenya, for example, may use 2 to 5 litres of water a day.
Anything where you are asking people to change their habits or change their behaviour, it is a slow process. But we've managed to do it. It began really seriously in 1996 when we introduced water meters to all of the domestic residents across the city. That was met with very big concerns from the community. People thought that the city would die, that the grass would go brown, and how would we ever manage to maintain the green look of the city? Well, as you can see, now 6 years later, the city hasn't died, the grass is green and the trees are growing. And that's because people have accepted that they need to understand what a precious resource water is. The best way to make people understand how precious anything is to pay for it. So if you pay for what you use, then you start to really appreciate what that resource is. And that's worked. We have significantly reduced the amount of water that people are using without the city going brown or dying. And it not only means that people are paying actually less in their water bills than they were 6 years ago, it also means that we've put off the expectation of having to build another dam for at least 35 years. And we would hope with further initiatives we could even extend that further.
The water treatment process starts with the addition of a coagulant. It's necessary to destabilise those impurities so that they can be removed by the filtration process. The coagulant is added in front of the sedimentation basin, and the sedimentation basin allows some of the material, the impurities with the coagulant, to settle out, and the water then flows through onto the filtration process. The sedimentation process therefore is a precursor for the filtration process and allows better quality water and longer filter runs. The filtration process itself is through up to 1 metre of monomedia sand. They're rapid sand filters, and they remove the impurities that have been destabilised by the addition of the coagulant. The destabilised impurities that are removed have to be backwashed out of the filter from time to time, approximately every 24 hours. The water that is produced from the filters is of a fairly good quality and just requires polishing before it is sent off to the people of Brisbane. The polishing consists of adjustment in pH to make the water less corrosive in the pipework, and also the addition of chlorine. The chlorine is a disinfectant which will make sure that any small bacterial viruses that have got through the treatment process are removed before the water reaches the residents.
From the treatment plants we have 40 storages throughout the system. Those storages range in size from 160 megalitres, which is 160 Olympic swimming pools, to round about half an Olympic swimming pool. To get to those storages, it's got to go through 6,500 kilometres of water pipes, and those water pipes, they range in size from 3 metres in diameter down to 60 millimetres, a 60 millimetre pipe. That's the type of pipe you might find in a cul-de-sac around the city. From those little pipes, it then goes via what we call a water service to your water meter. Those pipes are generally about 20 millimetres in size, and then from the water meter, it's into your house. There's a number of other things that we've got to do when we're delivering the water. It's not just a case of bringing it from the reservoirs through the pipes and getting it to a person's house. We're trying to make sure that those people receive it at a pressure that they can use it inside the house. Now, within that pressure as well, I've got to make sure that the water distribution system doesn't get too much pressure, because then that's when I then start blowing up water pipes. I'm balancing the good and the bad in this in order to make sure a customer has a good quality water pressure at the same time as not blowing up the system that's trying to deliver that water.
That's it.
Also too, the fire flows. The water in our water mains is also used for fighting fires. So I have to maintain that system such that there's always enough water there so the fire brigade can use it, as well as the pressure. So there's a volume and pressure issue that has to be looked at when I'm pushing water around the system. Also, when water travels from Mount Crosby and through 6,600 kilometres of water pipe, that water has to be just as good a quality at one end as it is at the other end. So therefore I've got to cause the reservoirs to draw down or to use up the water through the day, and then I'm either filling it up at night or every second or third day I'm filling up reservoirs so that the water is not stagnating in the reservoirs or in the pipes. So there's a number of things that I've got to look at as I'm trying to bring that water down through the system.
The water quality is of paramount importance to us. The main reason for that is that the water that we produce can't be recalled. Once we put it into the storage reservoirs, it then travels down to the people of Brisbane, and it can't be recalled to fix any problems. Because of that, we have a very extensive quality control system in place. We monitor the water quality at very frequently through the process, at critical points in the process, and we monitor for various parameters that we are concerned with. We have 4 layers of quality control in place at the treatment plants. The first layer is continuous process monitoring. We have continual monitoring through electronic devices of pH, turbidity, whatever parameter we need to monitor at various points through the process. The backup for that SCADA-based quality control system is the operators themselves. They monitor the treatment process and collect samples at various points in the process while they're on their shift rounds. Those samples are analysed immediately and the results are a confirmation of the process control equipment. The third layer of quality control is that a couple of points in the process we take a 24-hour composite sample. That 24-hour composite sample is analysed by trained technicians in the laboratory, and they are confirming the results of the operation that the operators have collected. The fourth layer of our quality control system is that once a week a sample of that 24-hour composite samples is sent down to our main laboratory at Rocklea, where they do a very thorough, detailed analysis of a lot of water quality parameters that we cannot analyse for here on the treatment plants.
The water is sampled every shift up at Mount Crosby and at the other water treatment plants. It's important for us to be as far upstream in the process as we can with regard to quality assurance of the water, so that if there is a problem we can act very early in the process to correct that situation. Certainly our main focus is always public health related. The main threat to public health comes from microbial organisms, which can be fecal coliforms, Cryptosporidium, Giardia, viruses. Our testing, while may not focus specifically on some of those, looks at indicator organisms, which are coliforms and fecal coliforms, and if we find significant numbers of those, we know there's a problem and we can look further.
And I thought getting water to wash my car would be easy. Easy to waste, I guess. Everyone in the family can save water. Here's a few tips.
Take short showers. Each shower uses 10 to 20 litres of water every minute. And don't leave the water running when you brush your teeth. This could waste another 5 litres. If you have a dual flush toilet, only use the full flush when needed. A small drip from a worn washer in a tap can waste more than 200 litres of water each day. Wherever the tap may be, always make sure it's turned off properly when you finish using it. Other good advice for saving water around the house is to make sure the washing machine and dishwasher are full before using them. And let Mum and Dad know if a tap won't turn off properly or is leaking.
Saving water, no drama. How we dispose of wastewater is equally as important, but we'll look at that later. Let's look at how we can save water outside the home.
When you start a new garden, it's important to include plants that don't need a lot of water. The plants that do need water should be grouped together. When the garden's water, it's best done in the morning or evening so that it won't evaporate before it gets down into the soil. Water the roots of your plants, not the leaves, to avoid the water being blown away. And a less frequent soaking is far better than a light sprinkling that encourages roots to stay near the surface, where they're more vulnerable to heating up and drying out. With pot plants, a simple dunking in a bucket of water. Wait until the bubbles disappear and do the next pot. This saves water and ensures the plant gets a thorough drink. And like Ben, where possible, wash your car on the lawn and give the grass a drink. Don't leave the tap running and use a bucket and sponge.
I think that we haven't yet got to the stage of really appreciating how significant our natural water environment is, as we certainly have supported bushland protection, we certainly have supported stopping logging in certain areas. We've really understood the impact on our native wildlife. I think we're almost there with water. I think people are now starting to understand that creeks and rivers are as important as native forests, and that what we do in our house has a very big impact on those creeks and rivers, and we've got to be careful.
It's been a long drive from the Isles to the coast. Can't wait to see some water again.
So many people use water. There is only a finite amount of water ever on our earth at one time, and in our catchment at one time. We rely on rain to gain that water, and we simply face, in a growing population using that resource, the need to use it in a more conservative, sustainable way.
We are trying to look at ways in which we can introduce more and more recycled water into the general use of the community. In fact, if you look at the domestic area with all of our residents out there using water in their households every day, 57% of the water that any household uses in one day is either on a garden or being flushed through the toilet. Now, it seems to us an absolute shame that drinking water that is treated to the level of drinking quality, 57% of it simply being used to hose your garden or flush your toilet. I'm sure that in this day and age, we've got the technology to be able to be a little bit smarter about how we can actually use some of our grey water, some of our recycled water on those aspects alone. And that in itself will save an enormous amount of fresh water being run through the treatment plant, through the pipes and going down the drain for no really valuable reason.
Earlier, we looked at the supply of water to a typical city with a population of around 1 million people. In the second part of our story, we confront the challenges of getting rid of wastewater and sewerage.
We've got a fairly sophisticated system here. What we monitor here is all the water supply pump stations, that's pump stations and roadside boosters. We monitor all our reservoirs, we monitor the treatment plants, and in between all those reservoirs and pump stations, we have a whole range of flow meters and pressure gauges out there so that I can see that something's either doing the right thing in the water supply system or doing the wrong thing. We also monitor all the sewage pump stations and the sewage treatment plants as well.
A city like Brisbane has a sophisticated system of stormwater drains specifically designed to deal with our annual downfalls. Contrary to some people's perceptions, stormwater enters a different drainage system independent of the sewerage system. There's a good reason for this.
Certainly at the other end of the spectrum is the sewage treatment plants. Now, sewage treatment is a biological process. It uses bugs to pull the contaminants out of sewage, convert it into a sludge which we handle, digest and neutralise. But as I said, being a biological process, it's quite susceptible to poisoning by toxic chemicals that may be introduced into the sewage system.
All water that makes it into our sewerage system, whether it's wastewater or rain, has to be pumped, purified and treated as effluent. It's the only way the city can guarantee clean water and public health.
Certainly our main focus is always public health related. The main threat to public health comes from microbial organisms, which can be fecal coliforms, Cryptosporidium, Giardia, viruses. Our testing, while it may not focus specifically on some of those, looks at indicator organisms, which are coliforms and fecal coliforms, and if we find significant numbers of those, we know there's a problem and we can look further.
And we can see what's happening in the process.
Treating stormwater and other excess water in addition to sewerage makes water treatment very costly and a burden on our system. So where possible, it's important to keep stormwater out of our sewerage system.
The best way to keep our stormwater clean is to get rid of all the rubbish in the yard. It could go down into the drain and into the river. And tipping of oils or chemicals into the drain or the bin is deadly.
To tell us more about the local wastewater system, we speak to Council Engineer Lisa Hopkins.
Primary treatment is removing the stuff in the wastewater that you can see. The first stage is the screening stage. We have bar screens that remove the larger material like rags. Sometimes we get tennis balls in there, that sort of thing. So we take those out with the bar screens. The next stage is what's called grit removal. It's another physical process. We use gravity settling, bubble air through the water, and all the heavy stuff like grit and sand and silt settles to the bottom and it gets removed. The next stage of the process is in what are called primary settling tanks, and that's what's just behind me. The primary settling tanks remove the solid organic matter in the water. It's another physical process. The organic, there's a retention time in there. Because the water is in there long enough, the solids settle out and are removed from the bottom with scrapers. The grease in the water, fats and oils and that sort of thing, they'll float to the top and they're skimmed off the surface. This is called an aeration basin. The name of this particular process is the 5-stage Bardenfo process. It's a biological process for the treatment of water. So what we're removing in this part of the process is the stuff that you can't see, the soluble carbon and the nitrogen, and to a degree the phosphorus as well. And so what we're doing in this process is it goes through different stages, 5 of them, and they have different conditions to keep the bacteria that are living in there that we want to remove the nutrients. It's keeping these bacteria happy and alive. The the sludge from the biological process or the bacteria that we want to keep, it's separated out here. It's a physical process, and what's happening is called gravity separation. So the sludge is heavier than the water. It's allowed to separate out to the bottom of the tank, and it's removed and sent back to the beginning of the biological process. And then the water is allowed, it's decanted off the top. It flows over the top of these weirs.
Unlike stormwater, the wastewater and sewerage from around our city needs to be removed and treated and then disposed of. In Brisbane, the City Council provides a sewer system and sewerage treatment for 900,000 people. It also treats a large amount of industrial waste. In the process, the wastewater system transports, treats and safely disposes of about 325 million litres of wastewater each day.
So if we don't treat the wastewater, then we are going to destroy the ecosystem, the natural ecosystem, the balance there. So some of the things that we're removing, the rags and bigger stuff, if it goes into the bay, it might choke the animals in the bay or the birds. If the carbon and the nitrogen go into the bay, they can cause what's called eutrophication, which is the nutrients in there feed the algae, and you can get algal blooms. You can get a decreased dissolved oxygen in the water, which affects the fish because they don't have enough oxygen.
Effluent is the treated liquid resulting from the wastewater treatment process. Like in most major cities, the quality of effluent discharge is monitored continuously to ensure that local rivers and the surrounding environment is safeguarded for future generations.
Of Brisbane's water supply system, the estimate is about 30% of our water goes to industry. A lot of that water doesn't have to be good quality drinking water. A lot of that water could be from our sewage treatment plants. There'd still have to be some sort of fairly serious treatment there, but that water at the moment is just treated and put back into the environment. If that water could be brought back into our system, used in various industries, then we would have another major way of saving, or not building another dam.
What you can see behind me here is the water reclamation plant. It's a form of reusing water. So what we do is we take effluent from the wastewater plant and we treat it further, we polish it to a stage where it can be used by industry. And we then sell that to our industry customers. Well, we've got one here at the moment, that's BP. The water that we're producing from the water reclamation plant is really clean. It's been polished. So what's happened is it's gone through microfiltration and we've removed particles down to 0.2 of a micron, and then it's gone through reverse osmosis and it's removed particles on an ionic level. So what it's removing there, things like calcium ions and iron ions, the sorts of things that are naturally occurring in water. The advantage of doing this is that the amount of water that we're producing is 10 megalitres a day. That's about 8% of the total flow that we've got at Luggage Point Wastewater Treatment Plant. And this is 10 megalitres that we then don't need to take from our reservoirs and dams. So it's good for the environment in that way.
Most frequently, effluent is reused for irrigation of golf courses, sporting fields and other recreational uses.
Yeah, the members are very much aware of it because the financing of the installation of this water supply had to be passed by the membership. Since we've been using it, it's been very positive indeed. They've been able to determine that it has improved the quality of the playing surfaces on the golf course, and at times before where we had lots of dry areas, we don't have those anymore, and we're able to present the golf course year round in pristine condition. you would appreciate this is one of the premier golf courses in the country, and one of the critical elements of maintaining it at that level is to be able to produce a high quality playing surface at all times. And an important ingredient of that is a readily available supply of water so that we can irrigate the golf course to the level that we need. Previously, of course, we would have been on potable water from the City Council main water supply. The costs of continuing to use that supply to the extent that we needed to use it were becoming prohibitive, and we had the opportunity to take water from the Gibson Island treatment plant and have been doing that since 1996. That allows us to water a larger area of the golf course almost any time we want to. So the major advantages from our point of view of using this sort of water supply are, firstly, its availability in quantity and at any time that we need it, and also the cost of using that type of water supply. The technology involved in establishing the crossing from Gibson Island to the golf course involved the construction of a pipeline under the river, which was using fairly cutting-edge technology at the time that we did that. And we have established obviously storage areas for the water before we put it on the golf course. We've also established a means of treating the water again before it goes out onto the golf course. And of course we have to deliver the water through a fairly high-tech irrigation system. It's all computer controlled because we do have some limitations on when we can actually use this water for irrigation purposes.
So now you know all about water, where it comes from and where it goes. But before you go, listen to these wise words from Councillor Ray.
I mean, I think it's a real challenge, but I think it's one that we can actually meet. We know that water is a very precious resource across the world, and indeed Australia being the driest continent on earth, it is very important for us to be careful about how we manage our water system. Living in Brisbane basically means that we live in a subtropical climate, we get plenty of rainfall, we live on the coast, there is water all around us, and as a result many people take it for granted and just assume that it's always going to be there in plentiful supply and will always be of a quality that we can drink. We think that people need to understand that it's not always going to be there unless we start to do something about it. So it's not just about building the dams or stopping building dams. It's also about looking at the water that we use as a city and being a bit cleverer and a bit smarter about how we can use that more before we put it back into the natural system. So looking at the use of grey water, reuse, water recycling. At the moment we're working with large industries to look at the ways that they use water, and perhaps we can supply them with water that has already been treated through our wastewater treatment plants and that they can reuse. BP, for example, are now buying reused water off us to put through their cooling tanks. When you think about how precious water is, it seems almost a crime that we would use drinking quality water to run through an air conditioning unit. So basically we're trying to work with large users of water, the industrial and commercial users, to see if there are opportunities for them to buy reused or retreated water off us to use in areas that are not necessary for drinking quality.